Have you ever wondered what a human soul is worth? Is it measured in love, in dreams, in the laughter of a child? Or can it be weighed against acres of fertile land, against the promise of a bountiful harvest? My name is Eleanor Vance, and I'm 78 years old. My hair, now silver as a winter moon, holds the echoes of a truth so bitter, so profoundly cruel that many would rather believe it a nightmare. But it was real, every agonizing moment of it. I'm sitting here on my porch in rural Kentucky, the cicadas singing their endless summer song in the old oak trees, a sound that used to fill me with peace, but now often reminds me of the silence that followed the day my childhood ended. The day I learned that some parents value dirt more than their own flesh and blood. What I'm about to tell you isn't a fairy tale, nor is it a simple anecdote. It's a confession, a burden I've carried for over 6 decades, a wound that bled for years in silence. It's the story of how I became property, a living deed to a piece of land, and how the man who bought me, Mr. Abernathy, made sure I understood the full, horrifying meaning of ownership. This isn't a story for the faint of heart, nor for those who believe that evil always wears a monstrous face. Sometimes, evil wears a polite smile, speaks in hushed tones, and hides behind the veneer of respectability. But a truth it is, and truths, my dears, must be spoken, no matter how painful, no matter how much they make your stomach churn. I remember the scent of pine and damp earth, the taste of wild berries, the feel of the sun on my face as I ran through the fields. My world was simple, bounded by the creek where I fished for minnows and the old oak tree where I'd climb to watch the world go by. My parents, Martha and Silas, were hard-working folks, their hands rough from tilling the stubborn soil, their faces weathered by sun and worry. They loved the land more than anything, a deep, almost spiritual connection to the acres that had been in our family for generations. I was their only child, a quiet girl who loved to read the worn books from the traveling library cart and dream of a life beyond the mountains. I imagined myself in a big city, wearing fine dresses, teaching children, or perhaps even writing stories. My dreams were my secret companions, whispered only to the rustling leaves and the murmuring creek. Our life was hard, but it was ours. We grew our own food, raised a few chickens, and traded eggs and vegetables at the general store. Money was always scarce, a constant nagging worry that hung in the air like the mountain mist. My father, a proud man, often spoke of the land as our legacy, our only true wealth. "This land, Eleanor," he'd say, his voice rough but earnest. "It's in our blood. It's who we are." My mother, quieter, would nod, her eyes reflecting the same deep reverence for the soil. They taught me to respect the land, to work it, to understand its rhythms. I learned to plant, to harvest, to preserve, my small hands growing strong from the labor. I never questioned their devotion to the land, for it was the very foundation of our existence. But there was a shadow, a persistent, creeping unease that I couldn't quite name. It was the way my parents' eyes would sometimes linger on the few acres of fertile land owned by old Mr. Abernathy, a wealthy, reclusive man who lived in a grand house on the other side of the valley. He was known for his vast holdings, his shrewd business dealings, and his solitary, almost sinister reputation. He rarely came to town, but when he did, a hush would fall over the general store. He was a man of power, a man who got what he wanted. My father would sometimes sigh. If only we had land like Abernathy's, our troubles would be over. My mother would simply cross herself, a silent prayer. I never imagined that their longing for land, for prosperity, would one day become the very instrument of my undoing. I was a child, innocent and trusting, unaware of the dark currents that flowed beneath the surface of our quiet mountain life. Currents that would soon drag me into a nightmare from which there seemed no escape. My earliest memories are steeped in the raw, untamed beauty of the Appalachian Mountains. Our home was a modest two-room cabin built by my grandfather's calloused hands, nestled deep within a hollow where the air always smelled of pine needles and damp earth after a summer rain. Life was simple, dictated by the relentless rhythm of the seasons and the unforgiving demands of the land. We rose with the sun, worked until dusk, and gathered around a crackling fire as night fell, sharing stories whispered in the flickering shadows and the meager warmth of our existence. It was a life of constant labor, yes, but also of profound connection to the soil that sustained us, a connection my parents held above all else. My father, Silas Vance, was a man carved from the very mountains he worked. His face was a landscape of wrinkles, etched by years of sun and wind, his hands gnarled from tilling the stubborn earth. He was proud, fiercely independent, and possessed an almost religious reverence for the land. "This soil, Eleanor," he'd often say, his voice rough but earnest, as he let the rich dirt sift through his fingers. "It's more than just dirt. It's our blood, our history. It's who we are." He taught me how to plant corn, how to coax life from the rocky ground, how to read the signs of the weather in the shifting clouds. He believed in honest work and the simple dignity of providing for one's family, a creed he lived by with unwavering devotion. He wasn't outwardly affectionate, rarely offering a hug or a tender word, but his quiet presence, his steady gaze, and the way he'd sometimes let me ride on his broad shoulders as he walked the fields, spoke volumes of his deep, unspoken love. My mother, Martha, was a woman of quiet strength, her spirit as resilient as the mountain wildflowers that bloomed defiantly in the harshest conditions. She moved through our small home with a gentle grace, her hands always busy, kneading dough for our daily bread, mending clothes with meticulous stitches, or tending to our small flock of chickens. She taught me to sew, to cook, to preserve the bounty of our garden, skills that would later become both a burden and a lifeline. Her lullabies, sung softly as I drifted off to sleep, were the sweetest melodies I knew, a comforting balm against the vast darkness of the mountain nights. She was devout, her faith a quiet, unwavering flame that burned brightly within her, guiding her through every hardship. She believed in God's plan, in enduring suffering with grace, and in the sanctity of family, a sanctity that, in her mind, was inextricably linked to the land. She was the gentle hand that guided me, the soft voice that comforted me, my island of safety in a world that could often be unforgiving. I was their only child, a quiet girl who found solace and escape in books, a travelling library cart a rare and wondrous sight, would visit our hollow once a month, bringing with it worn copies of novels and poetry. I devoured them, losing myself in tales of faraway lands and grand adventures, of brave knights and beautiful ladies, of bustling cities and endless possibilities. I dreamed of a life beyond the mountains, a life where I could wear fine dresses, teach children in a bustling schoolhouse, or perhaps even write stories of my own. My dreams were my secret companions, whispered only to the rustling leaves of the old oak tree in our yard and the murmuring creek that flowed nearby. I would spend hours under that tree, sketching in a worn notebook, imagining a world where possibilities stretched as far as the horizon, a world where I could be more than just a mountain girl. Our life was hard, undeniably so. Money was always scarce, a constant, nagging worry that hung in the air like the mountain mist. We grew our own food, raised a few chickens, and traded eggs and vegetables at the general store in town. My parents often spoke of the land as our legacy, our only true wealth. But it was a legacy that barely kept us fed, a constant struggle against poverty. My father would sometimes sigh, his gaze fixed on the distant fertile acres across the valley. If only we had land like Abernathy's, our troubles would be over. He spoke of Mr. Abernathy, a wealthy, reclusive man who owned vast tracts of prime land, a shadowy figure rarely seen in town, but whose name carried immense weight, a symbol of power and prosperity. My mother would simply cross herself, a silent prayer, whenever his name was mentioned, a gesture that always sent a shiver down my spine, though I didn't understand why. I never imagined that their longing for more land, for a life free from the constant struggle, would one day become the very instrument of my undoing. I was a child, innocent and trusting, unaware of the dark currents that flowed beneath the surface of our quiet mountain life, currents that would soon drag me into a nightmare from which there seemed no escape. The subtle glances my parents exchanged when Mr. Abernathy's name came up, the way their faces would tighten with a mixture of envy and desperation, were the first, almost imperceptible cracks in the foundation of my secure world. I was too young to understand the true cost of their dreams, too naive to see the storm gathering on the horizon, a storm that would soon engulf my world and leave me fighting for my very soul. The whispers about Mr. Abernathy, once distant echoes in the hollow, solidified into a terrifying, undeniable truth when I turned 14. That winter was a cruel one, its icy grip tightening around our small farm, squeezing the last drops of hope from the land. The crops had failed, the few chickens we had were sickly, and the well, our lifeblood, was dangerously low. Desperation, a cold, insidious serpent, coiled around my parents' hearts, blinding them to everything but survival. One evening, as the wind howled outside, rattling the cabin windows like a hungry ghost, my father, Silas, returned from town. His face was grim, etched with a new, unsettling resolve. He sat at the kitchen table, his hands, usually so strong and steady, trembled slightly as he poured himself a cup of lukewarm coffee. My mother, Martha, watched him, her face pale, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. The air in our small home was thick with an unspoken tension, heavier than any mountain fog. Abernathy, my father began, his voice barely a whisper, a dry rustle like dead leaves. He's offered a deal for the south pasture, the one with the spring. My mother gasped, a small, choked sound, a tiny bird caught in a snare. The south pasture was prime land, fertile and well-watered, a dream they had chased for years, a promised land in their desperate prayers. But what does he want in return, Silas? She asked, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrored my own. My father looked at me then, his gaze, usually so direct and honest, now darting away, unable to meet my eyes. A cold dread, like that serpent, coiled tighter in my stomach, squeezing the breath from my lungs. He wants a wife, my father finally choked out, his voice cracking, raw with a shame he couldn't hide. A young one, to care for his house, to give him heirs. My mother began to weep silently, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't protest. She didn't scream. She simply wept, her shoulders shaking with a grief that felt both personal and universal. I was 14, just 14. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs, shattering the fragile world I had known. A wife? For Mr. Abernathy? The old man, rumoured to be in his late 60s, with a face like a dried apple and eyes that always seemed to watch from the shadows. The man who rarely left his grand, isolated house, a place whispered to be haunted by the ghosts of his past. I wanted to scream, to run, to plead, to claw my way out of that moment. But my voice was trapped in my throat, a silent, desperate cry. My parents, the people who had taught me right from wrong, who had held me close when I was sick, were selling me. For land, for a few acres of dirt. The sanctity of our family, the love I had always believed in, crumbled into dust. The deal was struck quickly, brutally, with the cold efficiency of a business transaction. There was no discussion, no choice given to me. My mother, her eyes red-rimmed and distant, moved like a ghost as she packed my meagre belongings into a small satchel. "It's for the best, Eleanor," she whispered, her voice devoid of emotion, a hollow echo. "He's a wealthy man. You'll have a good life. Better than this. Better than this. Better than a life where I was loved, even if we were poor." My father avoided my gaze, his silence a heavy shroud that suffocated any remaining hope. He spoke of sacrifice, of securing our future, of doing what's necessary. But all I heard was property, transaction, betrayal. The day I was taken to Mr. Abernathy's estate was a blur of terror. He arrived in a polished black carriage, a stark, gleaming contrast to our humble wagon, a symbol of the chasm that now separated me from my past. He was even older, more withered than I remembered, his eyes, small and beady, raking over me with an unsettling possessiveness that made my skin crawl. "She's a pretty one, Silas," he rasped, his voice like dry. "Zaid round seedling," a sound that would forever haunt my nightmares. Just as promised. My father nodded, his face a mask of stone, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond me. My mother, standing by the cabin door, looked away, her hands clutching her apron, her body rigid with a silent, agonizing surrender. I wanted to run to her, to beg her to save me, but my legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot. I was pushed into the carriage, the door clanging shut behind me with a finality that echoed the closing of a coffin lid, severing the last thread to my childhood. The journey to his estate was short, but felt like an eternity. The grand house, looming against the darkening sky, was even more imposing up close, its windows like vacant eyes staring into the void, promising only coldness. Inside, it was vast and silent, filled with heavy, dark furniture and the scent of dust and decay, a mausoleum of forgotten lives. He led me to a room, a large, opulent chamber with a four-poster bed draped in velvet, its richness a mockery of my poverty of spirit. "This is your room now," he said, his voice low, his eyes never leaving mine. "And you are mine, my property." The words, spoken with such chilling finality, echoed in the cavernous room, sealing my fate, branding me with his ownership. The abuse began subtly, an insidious creep that burrowed deep into my soul. He was not overtly violent at first, not in the way I had imagined. It was the constant, suffocating presence, the possessive gaze that followed my every move, even when he was not in the room. He would watch me eat, watch me clean, watch me simply exist, his eyes never leaving me, a silent, predatory assessment. "A good wife is seen, not heard," he'd say, his voice a low rumble, a constant reminder of my voicelessness. He would touch me, a hand on my arm, a finger tracing my cheek, touches that were meant to be paternal but felt cold, invasive, filled with a predatory intent that made my skin crawl. He would insist I wear certain dresses, ones that were too old for me, too revealing, making me feel exposed and vulnerable, a display for his private viewing. He would make me sit with him for hours in the drawing room, reading aloud from the Bible, his eyes fixed on me, not the holy text, his breath hot on my neck. "You must learn obedience, Eleanor. A wife's duty is to her husband, in all things." The escalation was gradual, but relentless, like a slow-acting poison. The touches became bolder, the demands more explicit. He would come into my room at night, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silent house, and sit on the edge of my bed, watching me, sometimes for hours. "You are my wife now, Eleanor," he'd whisper, his breath smelling of stale tobacco and something else, something foul and ancient. "And a wife has duties." My pleas, my silent tears, my desperate attempts to shrink away, were met with a cold, unyielding resolve. He would force himself upon me, his aged body a heavy, suffocating weight, his words a constant refrain. "You are mine, my property." Each act was a violation, a further chipping away at my soul, leaving me feeling hollowed out, defiled. I was no longer Eleanor, the girl who loved books and dreamed of gardens. I was merely a vessel, a possession, a piece of land traded for another. The silence of the house, once merely vast, now screamed with my unspoken pain, a constant, agonizing echo of my stolen innocence. The initial numbness, a merciful shroud that had protected my mind from the full horror of my new reality, slowly began to fray. The grand house, with its echoing halls and heavy, dark furniture, was not merely a cage, it was a psychological prison, meticulously designed to break my spirit. Mr. Abernathy's words, "You are my property," were not just a statement. They were a constant, insidious hum, woven into the very fabric of my days. He rarely raised his voice, but his control was absolute, suffocating. He didn't need to shout. His silent, watchful presence was enough to instill a terror that froze my blood. He had a particular cruelty that went beyond the physical. He would force me to sit in the drawing room for hours while he meticulously catalogued his possessions, his rare books, his antique firearms, his prized hunting dogs. And then his gaze would fall on me, a slow, deliberate sweep from my head to my bare feet. "And this," he would declare, not to me but to the empty air, "is my finest acquisition. Untamed, perhaps, but with proper handling, she will be invaluable." He spoke of me as if I were a new piece of furniture, a prize animal, never a human being. This constant dehumanization, the reduction of my entire existence to an object of his ownership, was a torment more profound than any physical pain. It was a systematic erasure of who I was, leaving me feeling like a ghost haunting my own body. The internal conflict was a raging storm within my skull. The child in me, the one who still yearned for her mother's lullabies and her father's steady hand, screamed for escape, for justice. But the part of me that had been forced to adapt, to survive, whispered of futility, of the inescapable nature of my fate. "They sold you, Eleanor. No one is coming. You are alone." I would lie awake at night, staring at the ornate ceiling, the velvet drapes, the symbols of my captivity, and plot impossible escapes. I imagined myself scaling the high walls, running through the dark woods, finding my way back to the hollow. But then the cold reality would set in. Where would I go? Who would believe me? My own parents had deemed me expendable. My attempts at resistance were small, desperate acts of defiance that only served to highlight my powerlessness. I would deliberately misplace his reading glasses or subtly burn the edges of his toast. Tiny acts of rebellion that brought a fleeting, dangerous thrill. But he always noticed. His punishment was never a beating, it was far more insidious. He would make me stand for hours in the cold, unheated pantry, reciting passages from the Bible, while he sat just outside, listening, his presence a chilling weight through the thin door. "The Lord abhors disobedience, Eleanor," he'd call out, his voice calm, almost benevolent. "And so do I." Or he would deny me food, not for a day, but for 2, sometimes 3, leaving me to endure the gnawing hunger, a stark reminder of his absolute control over my very survival. He also began to control my appearance. He despised the simple, practical dresses I had arrived in. "Unsuitable for a lady of this house," he'd sneer. He bought me new clothes, fine silks and satins, but they were always too tight, too revealing, designed to make me feel exposed and uncomfortable. He would force me to wear my hair down, long and unbound, a stark contrast to the neat braids my mother had always insisted upon. "A woman's beauty is her husband's pride," he'd declare, running his gnarled fingers through my hair, a touch that made my skin crawl. He would make me parade in front of him, turning slowly while he appraised me, his eyes cold and calculating. It was a performance, a constant reminder that my body was not my own, but a display for his pleasure, a symbol of his wealth and power. The most terrifying aspect was the way he began to manipulate my perception of reality. He would tell me stories of the outside world, tales of bandits and wild animals, of cruel strangers and unforgiving wilderness, all designed to convince me that his house, his prison, was the only safe place for me. "Out there, Eleanor, you are nothing. Here you are protected. You are mine." He painted a picture of a world so terrifying that the thought of escape became almost as daunting as the thought of staying. My mind, once filled with dreams of freedom, became a battleground, constantly fighting against the insidious whispers of his control. I was losing myself, piece by agonizing piece, and the terror of that loss was a cold, constant companion. The bitter cold of winter had given way to the deceptive warmth of early spring, but no amount of sunshine could thaw the ice that had formed around my heart. The grand house, once merely a gilded cage, had become a tomb, silent and suffocating, each shadow a lurking threat. Mr. Abernathy's presence was a constant heavy weight, his possessive gaze a physical burden that pressed down on me, stealing my breath, making my skin crawl. The physical violations had become more frequent, more brutal, each act a further desecration of my spirit, chipping away at the last vestiges of my innocence. I had learned to detach, to float above my body, watching the horrors unfold as if they were happening to someone else, a desperate coping mechanism. But even detachment achievement has its limits, and the soul, no matter how bruised, eventually cries out for release. It was a Tuesday, I remember with chilling clarity, because Tuesdays were his business days. He would return from town, his face flushed from drink, his mood unpredictable, a storm brewing behind his beady eyes. That particular Tuesday, a heavy, relentless rain had begun to fall, drumming a monotonous rhythm on the roof, mirroring the frantic, desperate beat of my own heart. I was in the kitchen preparing his supper, my hands trembling as I chopped vegetables, the knife feeling impossibly heavy in my grasp. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, the cloying scent of his cheap tobacco, and an unspoken dread that hung heavy, suffocating. He entered the kitchen, his heavy footsteps echoing on the wooden floor, each thud a hammer blow to my already frayed nerves, and I instinctively stiffened, my body bracing for the inevitable. "Eleanor," he slurred, his voice thick with liquor, a low, guttural rumble that sent shivers down my spine. "Come here, girl. I need you." He didn't ask. He commanded, his tone leaving no room for refusal. My stomach churned, a wave of nausea washing over me. I turned, my face a mask of practiced obedience, but my eyes, I hoped, held a flicker of the hatred that now burned within me. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong despite his drunken state, and pulled me towards him. His breath, hot and foul, washed over my face. You've been looking at me with those defiant eyes lately, girl. Think you're too good for me, do you? His grip tightened, digging into my flesh. I'll teach you respect. I'll teach you who owns you. His words, usually a dull throb, now ignited a furious blaze within me. Owns me. The image of my parents, their faces etched with desperation as they traded me for land, flashed before my eyes. The years of silent suffering, the endless nights of terror, the defilement of my body and soul. It all culminated in that single, burning moment. I was no longer the frightened girl who cowered in corners. Something snapped. A primal scream tore through my throat, raw and guttural, a sound I hadn't known I possessed. It wasn't a plea, it was a roar of defiance, a rejection of his ownership. He recoiled, startled by the unexpected outburst, his grip momentarily loosening. It was all I needed. My hand, still clutching the heavy butcher knife I had been using, moved instinctively. I didn't aim to kill, only to escape. The blade, dull from years of use, scraped against his arm, a shallow cut, but enough to draw a gasp of pain and a spurt of crimson. He bellowed, a sound of shock and rage, releasing me as he clutched his arm. I didn't hesitate. The kitchen door, usually locked from the outside, was ajar. I burst through it, into the pouring rain, the cold drops a shocking, welcome slap against my face. I ran blindly, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate primal need for freedom. The mud sucked at my bare feet, the branches lashed at my face. But I didn't stop. I ran through the fields, across the creek, up the treacherous mountain path, the sound of his enraged shouts fading behind me, swallowed by the drumming rain. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. Away from him, away from that house, away from the life that had been forced upon me. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out, collapsing in a heap beneath the gnarled roots of an ancient oak tree, its massive branches offering a meager shelter from the relentless downpour. I lay there, shivering, soaked to the bone, the cold seeping into my very marrow, but a strange, exhilarating warmth bloomed in my chest. I was free. For the first time in years, I was truly free. The cut on his arm, the look of shock on his face, it was a small victory, but it was mine. I had fought back. I had survived. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the heavy clouds, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and faint grey, I heard the distant baying of hounds. He was coming. He wouldn't let his property escape so easily. Panic flared, cold and sharp, but it was quickly replaced by a fierce resolve. I would not be caught. Not again. I pushed myself up, my body screaming in protest, and began to walk, then run, deeper into the woods, towards the rising sun, towards an uncertain future, but a future that, for the first time, felt like it might truly be my own. I was a wild thing, broken but not tamed, and I would fight for every breath of my newfound freedom. The forest, once a place of innocent play, was now my accomplice, its dense undergrowth and winding paths my only hope. The adrenaline that had surged through me, giving me the strength to strike and flee, slowly began to recede, leaving my body trembling, aching in every muscle. The cold rain, which had felt like a cleansing baptism just moments before, now chilled me to the bone. My thin nightgown, soaked through, clung to my skin, offering no protection against the biting wind that whipped through the trees. My bare feet, once accustomed to the soft earth of our family farm, were now a mass of cuts, scrapes, and throbbing bruises from the sharp stones and thorny undergrowth of the dense Appalachian woods. Each step was a fresh agony, but the fear of Mr. Abernathy, of being dragged back to that suffocating tomb, was a far greater pain, a relentless whip driving me forward. I ran blindly, driven by instinct, not direction. The forest, once a place of childhood wonder, now felt like a vast, menacing labyrinth. Every snapping twig, every rustle in the leaves, every hoot of an owl sent a jolt of terror through me. I imagined his men, their faces grim, their hounds baying, hot on my trail. The thought of their heavy footsteps, of the triumphant glint in Mr. Abernathy's eyes if they caught me, fueled my desperate flight. I stumbled, fell, picked myself up again, my lungs burning, my throat raw from thirst. The sun, when it finally broke through the heavy clouds, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and faint grey, offered little warmth, but its light was a small comfort, a sign that the night and its immediate horrors had passed. By midday, I was utterly exhausted, my vision blurred, my head throbbing, my stomach cramped with hunger, a familiar ache, but now compounded by the terrifying uncertainty of where my next meal would come from. I knew I couldn't go on much longer. Just as despair threatened to swallow me whole, as the darkness at the edges of my vision began to close in, I saw it, a thin wisp of smoke curling lazily into the sky, a sign of human presence. Hope, fragile but persistent, flickered within me, a tiny, desperate flame against the encroaching darkness. I pushed through the last thicket of bushes, my body screaming in protest, and emerged into a small, sun-dappled clearing. There, nestled amongst the towering trees, was a tiny ramshackle cabin, its walls weathered, its chimney smoking. An old woman, her back to me, was tending a small vegetable patch, her movements slow and deliberate, her silver hair braided neatly down her back. My heart pounded. Should I approach? What if she was like Mr. Abernathy? What if she turned me away, or worse, turned me in? But the gnawing hunger, the desperate thirst, and the overwhelming need for safety outweighed my fear. Hello? My voice was a weak croak, barely audible, a sound that felt foreign even to my own ears. The old woman straightened slowly, turning to face me. Her face was a road map of wrinkles, etched by years of sun and hardship, but her eyes, though faded, held a surprising warmth, a deep, ancient kindness that seemed to penetrate my fear. She wore a simple patched dress, and her hands, though gnarled, seemed gentle. She didn't flinch, didn't show surprise, just looked at me with a calm, assessing gaze. "Well now, look what the cat dragged in," she said, her voice raspy, but not unkind, a voice that carried the wisdom of the mountains. "You look like you've seen a ghost, child, and a hungry one at that." I stood there, trembling, unable to speak, tears welling in my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in so long. She simply nodded, as if she understood everything without a single word being spoken. "Come on in, then. No sense standing out there in the cold. I got some stew on the fire." She didn't ask my name, didn't ask where I came from, didn't ask why I was alone and dishevelled. She simply offered warmth and sustenance, a lifeline thrown to a drowning soul. Her name, I would soon learn, was Agnes. I followed her into the cabin, the scent of wood smoke and simmering stew filling my nostrils, a comforting aroma that made my stomach rumble loudly. The interior was small but meticulously clean, filled with simple handmade furniture and the quiet hum of a life lived in harmony with nature. She sat me down by the crackling fireplace, its flames dancing a welcoming jig, and handed me a bowl of steaming vegetable stew. It was the most delicious thing I had ever tasted, each spoonful a burst of flavor, a nourishment that seeped into my very bones. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, feeling the warmth spread through my body, chasing away the chill. As I ate, she watched me, her gaze steady and compassionate. "You're safe here, child," she said, her voice soft, her words a balm to my raw nerves. "My name's Agnes. I live alone. No one bothers me out here." I finished the stew, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and profound exhaustion. I was free, yes, but what did that freedom mean? I had no home, no family, no possessions. I was a fugitive, a girl who had escaped one prison, only to find herself adrift in a vast, uncertain world. The physical pain was subsiding, but the psychological scars, the deep-seated fear and the gnawing sense of betrayal remained. I was safe for now, but the challenges of truly living, of building a new life from the ashes of my past, were just beginning. The small, humble cabin of Agnes, nestled deep within the whispering woods, became my immediate refuge. It was a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive grandeur of Mr. Abernathy's estate, yet the transitions was not without its own set of profound challenges. My body, though no longer under the immediate threat of his presence, was a landscape of pain and exhaustion. The cuts on my feet and arms, though cleaned and bandaged by Agnes with a gentle touch, throbbed relentlessly. My muscles, accustomed to constant, forced labor, now felt heavy and unresponsive, protesting every movement. The fever which had burned so fiercely during my escape had left me weak and prone to shivering fits, even by the warmth of Agnes's crackling fireplace. Agnes, with her quiet wisdom and boundless patience, understood that healing was not merely about mending flesh. She moved around me with a quiet grace, preparing nourishing broths from foraged herbs and wild game, coaxing my stomach, accustomed to scraps and gnawing hunger, back to accepting sustenance. The scent of wood smoke and simmering herbs filled the small cabin, a comforting aroma that slowly began to replace the lingering stench of stale tobacco and decay that had clung to me from Mr. Abernathy's house. Each meal was a small victory, each bite a step away from the emptiness that had been my constant companion. I ate slowly, savoring every morsel, feeling the warmth spread through my body, chasing away the chill that had settled deep within my bones. But the physical recovery was only the surface. The emotional and psychological wounds ran far deeper, festering beneath the surface like unseen sores. Sleep, though no longer haunted by the immediate fear of Mr. Abernathy's footsteps, was often restless, plagued by vivid, terrifying nightmares. I would relive the moments of his touch, the chilling finality of his words, "You are my property," and the desperate silent screams that had been trapped in my throat. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs, convinced he was still there, lurking in the shadows. Agnes would be there, a silent, comforting presence, her hand gently stroking my hair, her voice a soft murmur, assuring me that I was safe, that it was just a dream, that the cabin was secure. She never pressed me to talk, never demanded explanations, but her silent understanding was a balm to my wounded soul, a quiet acceptance that allowed me to simply be. The news of my escape and Mr. Abernathy's subsequent rage spread like wildfire through the scattered hollows and small towns of the mountains. He was a powerful man, and his humiliation was public. Whispers reached even our secluded cabin, carried by the occasional trapper or peddler who passed through. Some spoke of Mr. Abernathy's relentless search, his hounds baying through the woods, his men scouring the trails. Others, particularly those who had always resented his wealth and his ruthless ways, spoke of a wild justice, a mountain spirit that had finally struck back. There were even rumors that my parents, shamed by the scandal, had left the hollow, unable to face the judgment of their neighbors. I felt a strange mix of fear and a grim satisfaction. The world was finally seeing him for what he was, even if it meant my own name was now linked to scandal. However, the societal challenges of my newfound freedom were subtle but pervasive. I had been a child, then a possession, and now I was a fugitive, a girl with a past that no one fully understood. Trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered, and I found it difficult to truly believe in the kindness of others. Every kind word, every gentle gesture was met with an instinctive wariness. I had learned that kindness could be a mask, a prelude to exploitation. I flinched at loud noises, recoiled from sudden movements, and found it difficult to look people directly in the eye. The constant dehumanization had stripped me of my self-worth, leaving me feeling utterly worthless. Learning to speak my mind, to express a preference, felt like a monumental task, as if my voice itself was still trapped. Agnes, however, was different. She was a quiet force, her acceptance unconditional. She taught me to identify the edible plants, to track small game, to read the signs of the forest. These were practical skills, but they were also lessons in self-reliance, in trusting my own instincts, in finding my place in the wild, untamed world. She never asked me to justify my existence, never made me feel like a burden. She simply saw me, Eleanor, a young girl who had suffered, and offered me a chance to breathe, to heal, to simply be. I was safe for now, but the challenges of truly living, of building a new life from the ashes of my past, were just beginning. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with the lingering shadows of trauma, But for the first time, I had a guide, a quiet guardian who believed in my right to freedom. Agnes's cabin, a humble dwelling tucked away in the heart of the Appalachian wilderness, became the crucible in which my shattered spirit slowly began to mend. It was a long, arduous process, not a sudden burst of light, but a gradual, painstaking reconstruction, like rebuilding a house brick by painful brick. Agnes, with her quiet wisdom and boundless patience, was my anchor. She never pried, never demanded, simply offered a steady hand and an open heart. She taught me the rhythm of a peaceful home, a stark contrast to the chaotic tyranny I had known. I learned to tend her small vegetable patch, feeling the rich earth beneath my fingers, a tangible connection to life and growth. I learned to bake bread, the simple act of kneading dough, a meditative practice that soothed my anxious mind. One of the most profound gifts Agnes gave me was the gift of literacy. She would sit with me every evening, after the supper dishes were put away, and patiently teach me to read and write. My fingers, once calloused from scrubbing floors, now learned to hold a pencil, to form letters, to string words together. Each new word I learned was a tiny victory, a key unlocking a new door in my mind. I devoured every book she had, simple tales at first, then more complex stories, losing myself in worlds far removed from my own painful reality. Reading became my escape, my secret garden, a place where I could be anyone, go anywhere, without fear. Writing, though more difficult, became my voice, a way to express the emotions that had been trapped inside me for so long. I filled notebooks with my thoughts, my fears, my burgeoning hopes, a silent conversation with myself. Despite the newfound safety, the lingering shadows of my past still clung to me. Nightmares, vivid and terrifying, often jolted me awake. The echoes of Mr. Abernathy's chilling words, or the feeling of gnawing hunger still fresh in my mind. I would wake up screaming, drenched in cold sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs. Agnes would be there, a silent, comforting presence, her hand gently stroking my hair, her voice a soft murmur, telling me I was safe, that the shadows could not reach me here. She never dismissed my fears, never told me to get over it. She simply held space for my pain, allowing me to feel it, to acknowledge it, and slowly to release it. Agnes also introduced me to the rhythm of the mountain community, a network of self-sufficient families living off the land, connected by unspoken codes of mutual aid and respect. She took me to the small, infrequent gatherings at the general store, where folks would trade goods, news, and stories. I learned to observe, to listen, to discern the nuances of human interaction. I met other women who had faced their own hardships, their eyes holding a similar depth of understanding. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to form fragile connections, built on shared glances and unspoken empathy. These interactions, though brief, slowly chipped away at my social anxiety, building my confidence one small, tentative step at a time. My father, Silas, continued his search for me. I heard whispers from the occasional trapper or peddler who passed through the hollow. He had sold the farm, consumed by guilt and a desperate need to atone. He searched for me for years, his face etched with sorrow, his spirit broken. I never sought him out. The wound of his betrayal was too deep, too raw. I understood his desperation, the harsh realities of mountain life, but the image of him trading me for land remained a searing brand on my soul. I knew deep down that he suffered, and in a strange way, that was enough. My healing was not dependent on his forgiveness, but on my own ability to build a life free from the shadows he had cast. Agnes, my quiet guardian, had given me more than a home. She had given me the space and the tools to rebuild my soul, piece by painful piece, into something stronger, more resilient than I had ever imagined. She taught me that true strength wasn't about physical prowess, but about the unwavering spirit, the ability to rise again after being knocked down. She taught me the value of self-reliance, of finding joy in simple things, and of the profound connection to the earth that sustained us. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a student, a healer, a storyteller, slowly reclaiming my voice and my place in the world. The mountains, once a symbol of my confinement, now became a symbol of my freedom, their vastness a reflection of the boundless possibilities that stretched before me. The years I spent with Agnes were a slow, deliberate unfolding, like a tightly closed bud finally opening to the sun. The raw wounds of my past, though still present, began to soften, transforming into a landscape of scars that told a story of survival, not just suffering. Agnes, my quiet mentor, taught me not just about healing herbs and the rhythms of the earth, but about the profound strength that lay within me. She showed me that my experiences, far from being a source of shame, could be a wellspring of empathy, a unique lens through which to view the world and connect with others. I embraced the knowledge she imparted, becoming adept at identifying and preparing medicinal plants, a skill that would later serve me well. We would spend hours in the woods, Agnes patiently pointing out the subtle differences between similar-looking leaves, the specific bark of a healing tree, the best time to harvest roots. My hands, once trembling with fear, now moved with purpose and confidence, whether tending to Agnes's small garden or sketching the intricate patterns of leaves in my ever-present notebook. My voice, which had been silenced for so long, grew stronger, finding its cadence in the stories I read aloud to Agnes and the quiet conversations we shared by the fire. I began to understand that my identity was not defined by the trauma I had endured, but by the choices I made, the kindness I extended, and the life I meticulously built, piece by precious piece. After Agnes passed peacefully in her sleep, leaving me her small cabin and her legacy of quiet resilience, I knew I couldn't stay hidden in the hollow forever. Her passing, though sorrowful, felt like a gentle push, a sign that it was time for me to step fully into the world she had prepared me for. My heart, though still cautious, yearned for a broader purpose, a way to use my newfound strength to help others. I moved to a small, bustling town called Harmony Creek, a place that, despite its name, still held its share of hidden sorrows. I opened a small apothecary and herbalist shop, a cozy space filled with the comforting scents of dried herbs, beeswax candles, and the promise of gentle healing. People came to me with their ailments, their worries, their unspoken pains. I listened, truly listened, offering not just remedies for their bodies, but a compassionate ear for their souls. It was in Harmony Creek that I met Thomas, a quiet, kind-eyed carpenter who reminded me, in the best possible way, of my father. He was a widower, his own heart carrying the quiet ache of loss, and he saw in me not a broken girl, but a woman of profound depth and quiet strength. He never pried, never demanded, simply offered his steady presence, his gentle humor, and a respect that felt like a healing balm. We built a life together, not a grand, sweeping romance, but a partnership rooted in mutual understanding, shared values, and a deep, abiding affection. Our home, a small, sun-filled cottage with a porch swing and a sprawling garden, became a haven of peace, a place where laughter echoed freely and secrets were shared without fear. I never had children of my own, but my life was rich with the love of a chosen family. The young women who came to me seeking solace or a new path became my daughters. They were often lost, bruised by life, just as I had been. I taught them the wisdom of the herbs, the art of sewing, the importance of listening to their own inner voice, and the courage to say no. I shared my story, not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope for those who felt trapped in their own silent prisons. I became known as Grandma Eleanor, a title that filled my heart with a warmth I had once thought impossible. It was a name that carried the weight of experience, but also the lightness of profound love and acceptance. My father, Silas, eventually found me. He arrived at my shop one spring afternoon, a ghost of the proud man I remembered, his face etched with years of sorrow and regret. He had searched for me relentlessly, driven by a guilt that had consumed his life. He saw the woman I had become, the life I had built, the love that surrounded me. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only for a moment to sit, to witness the peace he had unknowingly denied me. We spoke little, but in his eyes I saw a profound understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the terrible price we had both paid. He passed away a few months later, his spirit finally at rest. I mourned him, not for the father who had betrayed me, but for the man he could have been, and for the peace he finally found. I had found my true identity, not in the name I was given at birth, but in the life I had forged, the connections I had made, and the purpose I had embraced. I was Eleanor Hope, a woman who had walked through fire and emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably whole. My past was a part of me, but it no longer defined me. It fueled my compassion, sharpened my resolve, and deepened my appreciation for every moment of peace and every act of kindness. Now, as I sit here on my porch, the very same porch of the home I built with my own hands, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple over my thriving garden, I look back on my life with a profound sense of gratitude. The air is thick with the sweet scent of honeysuckle and the gentle hum of evening insects, a symphony of peace. The scars remain, etched into my memory, a permanent reminder of the battles I fought, the trials I endured. They are like the lines on an ancient map, showing the treacherous paths I navigated, but also the distant, beautiful destinations I reached. But they no longer define me. They are simply a part of the tapestry of my life, a testament to the indomitable strength of the human spirit, a badge of honor for the arduous journey I have traveled. Mr. Abernathy, the man who claimed me as his property, met his end a few years after my escape. The official cause was a heart attack, but whispers in Harmony Creek suggested a more fitting demise, a lonely, agonizing one, consumed by his own bitterness and isolation. His vast estate, the very land for which I was traded, was eventually broken up and sold off, its dark history slowly fading into local legend. My parents, Silas and Martha, both passed away within a few years of each other, their lives marked by the heavy burden of their choice. My father, as I mentioned, found a measure of peace in his final days, his remorse a silent, constant companion. My mother, however, never truly recovered from the guilt. She lived out her days in quiet despair, her spirit broken by the weight of her complicity. I visited her once, years later before she passed. There were no words, no grand reconciliation, just a shared silence, a mutual acknowledgement of the irreversible damage. Their stories are intertwined with mine, a complex web of pain, and for some, the bitter taste of their own making. But my story, my dears, is not about them. It is about me. It is about the little girl who was silenced, who was broken, but who refused to stay down. It is about the woman who rose from the ashes, stronger and more compassionate than ever before. It is about the power of truth, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unwavering belief that even in the deepest despair, light change can be found, and a new beginning is always possible. I am a living testament to the fact that the human spirit, when nurtured and believed in, can overcome even the most profound darkness. I continued my work as an herbalist and seamstress for many decades. My hands, once raw and aching, now nimble and precise, creating beauty from fabric and healing from nature. My home became a beacon for countless young women, a place where they found not just shelter, but dignity, education, and the courage to forge their own paths. I taught them the wisdom of the herbs, the art of listening, and the importance of finding their own voices. I shared my story, not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope for those who felt trapped in their own silent prisons. My husband, Thomas, remained my steadfast companion until his passing a few years ago, his quiet love a constant source of strength and comfort. My adopted daughters, the young women I mentored and loved, now have families of their own, and their children call me Grandma Eleanor, a title I cherish more than any earthly possession. So, my dears, listen to the whispers, listen to the children, believe them. Do not let fear or convenience blind you to the suffering of others. Do not turn a deaf ear to the cries that are often hidden behind closed doors or polite smiles. For true healing begins when we dare to speak our truth, when we dare to believe in the power of love, and when we choose to live, truly live, even after the storm has raged and left its mark. Every sunrise is a new opportunity, every breath a victory. My life was a battlefield, but I won. And today, every stitch I sew, every herb I blend, every story I share is a testament to the power of hope for those still bound. Remember my name, Eleanor Hope. It is the name I chose, the name that embodies my journey. And remember that freedom is not just a word, it is a choice, a journey, and a destination worth fighting for. It is the air you breathe, the ground you walk on, the voice you reclaim. And I, Eleanor Hope, am living proof that miracles happen, not with a flash of divine light, but with the quiet strength of a determined heart and the unwavering support of those who choose to see and believe. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please leave a like, subscribe, and share it. Let my voice echo so that no one else has to suffer in silence.